Dr. Lisa Martinez wiped sweat from her forehead as she carefully brushed dirt away from the strange metal surface. She had been working on this dig site for 3 months now, and nothing had prepared her for what she was seeing. The metal was unlike anything humans had ever created. It seemed to glow with its own light, and strange symbols covered every inch of it. "Jake, you need to see this," she called to Captain Jake Thompson, who was checking supply containers near their landing shuttle. The planet Kepler 442b was supposed to be just another dead world, but Martinez had found something that would change everything. Thompson walked over and knelt beside her. He was a practical man, used to dealing with space pirates and equipment. Failures, not ancient mysteries, but even he could see that whatever Martinez had found was special. "What is it?" he asked, running his hand over the smooth surface. "I think it's a door," Martinez said. "Look at these symbols. They're not random. There's a pattern here, like some kind of language." She had spent her whole life studying old things, but this was different. This was older than anything humans had ever discovered. The two of them worked together to clear more dirt away. The metal surface was huge, maybe 20 feet across and perfectly round. As they cleaned it, the symbols began to glow brighter. Then something clicked and the entire surface started to move. "Step back," Thompson shouted, pulling Martinez away, but she shook free and moved closer to the opening door. "No, wait. Look at this," she said. Below them, a ramp led down into darkness, but the walls were covered in the same glowing symbols, providing enough light to see. "We have to go down there." Thompson wanted to argue, but he knew Martinez was right. This was the discovery of a lifetime. He grabbed their portable lights and communication equipment, and they began their descent into the underground chamber. The room they entered was enormous. The ceiling stretched up so high that their lights couldn't reach it. But what took their breath away were the walls. They were covered with moving pictures like television screens, but made of light itself. "My God," Martinez whispered. She approached one of the light displays and gasped. The image showed Earth, but not the Earth they knew. This Earth had strange cities and flying vehicles, and walking among the buildings were tall, thin creatures that definitely were not human. "Lisa, look at this one," Thompson called from across the room. His display showed what looked like a spaceship, but it was bigger than anything humans had ever built. And inside it, Martinez could see humans, but they were in cages. As they moved from display to display, the story became clearer and more horrible. The tall creatures, who seemed to be called Zephyrians according to the symbols, had taken humans from Earth long ago. The display showed Zephyrians studying humans like scientists study lab animals. They took notes, ran tests, and treated humans like pets. One display made Martinez feel sick to her stomach. It showed Zephyrians loading humans into large ships. The humans looked scared and confused. The Zephyrians were evacuating them from Earth, but not to save them. The next display showed why. Earth's sun was growing dim and cold. But instead of helping humans find a solution, the Zephyrians were moving them to a different planet to continue their experiments. "Jake, I don't think we evolved on Earth naturally," Martinez said, her voice shaking. "I think we were put there." Thompson studied another display that showed the new planet the humans were taken to. It looked exactly like modern Earth with the same continents and oceans. "You mean Earth isn't our real home?" "I think it was our prison," Martinez replied. She had found a display that showed the Zephyrians' final act. They had left humans on the new Earth with primitive tools and no memory of their true origin. Then the Zephyrians had flown away to distant stars, leaving humanity to survive or die on their own. But the most shocking display was the last one they found. It showed star maps with lines connecting different systems. One line led from Earth to a cluster of stars marked with Zephyrian symbols. The coordinates were clear enough for any space pilot to read. "They're still out there," Thompson said, quietly. "The bastards who abandoned us are still alive somewhere in space." Martinez was already connecting her portable computer to the alien displays, downloading everything she could. "We have to get this information back to Earth. The government needs to know. Everyone needs to know." As her computer worked, more displays activated around them. They showed other worlds, other species that the Zephyrians had experimented on. Some had been destroyed when they became too troublesome. Others had been moved to new planets when their old ones became inconvenient. It was a pattern that had continued for millions of years. "How long do you think they've been doing this?" Thompson asked. "Long enough to think they're gods," Martinez answered. The final files finished downloading, and she packed her equipment. "We need to go, now." They climbed back up the ramp, and as soon as they reached the surface, the door sealed itself behind them. But Martinez had what she needed. In her computer was the location of the creatures who had abandoned humanity 500,000 years ago. Back on their ship, Thompson sent an emergency message to Earth while Martinez studied the downloaded files. The more she learned, the angrier she became. The Zephyrians had kept detailed records of their human experiments. They had notes about human behavior, human intelligence, and human potential. But they wrote about humans the way scientists write about insects. "They never thought we'd amount to anything," Martinez said. "In their records, they call us amusing but limited specimens. They thought we'd never develop beyond stone tools." Thompson finished his message to Earth Command and sat down beside her. "Well, they were wrong about that." Martinez looked at the star charts again. The Zephyrian home base was far away, but not impossibly far. With humanity's fastest ships, it would take years to reach them. But it could be done. "Jake, what if we found them? What if we went to their home system and showed them what their limited specimens have become?" Thompson smiled grimly. "I think that's exactly what we should do. They abandoned us when they thought we were worthless. Let's show them what we've made of ourselves." Neither of them spoke the word revenge, but they both felt it. Humanity had spent 500,000 years wondering if they were alone in the universe. Now they knew they weren't alone, but they also knew they had been thrown away like unwanted pets. The Zephyrians had made one critical mistake. They had assumed that abandoning humans would be the end of the story. They never considered what would happen if their abandoned children grew up to be stronger than their parents. Admiral Ryan Collins stood in the center of Earth's largest war room, staring at the holographic display that showed everything Dr. Martinez had discovered. Around him, the most powerful people in human space sat in stunned silence. The President of Earth, Katie Johnson, had her head in her hands. The Secretary of Defense looked like he wanted to punch something. "So let me make sure I understand this correctly," President Johnson said slowly. "Humanity didn't evolve on Earth. We were put here by aliens who treated us like pets. And when their home planet had problems, they just dumped us on Earth and flew away." "That's correct, Madam President," Admiral Collins replied. "And according to the star charts Dr. Martinez found, they're still out there, living in a system called the Andromeda Approach, about 40,000 light-years from here." Dr. Alex Kim, the head of Human Weapons Development, leaned forward in his chair. "Admiral, with our current technology, how long would it take to reach them?" "Our fastest ships could make the journey in about 18 months, Collins answered. "But that's just travel time. If we're going to confront these Zephyrians, we need to be prepared for anything." President Johnson stood up and walked to the large window that looked out over Earth's capital city. Below them, millions of people were going about their daily lives, completely unaware that their entire understanding of human history had just changed. "What are you suggesting, Admiral?" she asked. Collins activated another holographic display. This one showed Earth's military forces, spread across dozens of star systems. "I'm suggesting we give these Zephyrians a lesson they'll never forget. They abandoned us because they thought we were worthless. Let's show them what worthless looks like when it's armed with fusion weapons." The room erupted in discussion. Some officials worried about starting a war with a species that was clearly more advanced than humanity. Others argued that the Zephyrians deserved whatever happened to them. But President Johnson raised her hand for silence. "Dr. Kim, what kind of weapons do we have that might be effective against Zephyrian technology?" Kim smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Madam President, we've been developing new weapon systems for the past 50 years, preparing for the possibility of hostile alien contact. The Zephyrians might be advanced, but they've been treating other species like pets for millions of years. They probably haven't had a real war in forever." He activated his own display. showing blueprints and technical specifications. We have quantum torpedo systems that can punch through any known form of energy shielding. We have temporal disruption weapons that can age enemy ships into dust in seconds. And we have something special that I call the Prometheus engine. What does the Prometheus engine do? Admiral Collins asked. It can ignite a star, Kim replied simply. Not destroy it, but force it to burn hotter and faster. It can turn a normal sun into a red giant in a matter of hours. Any planets in that system become uninhabitable. The room fell silent again. President Johnson turned back to face the group. Are you telling me we have the ability to destroy entire solar systems? Yes, Madam President. We built it as a last resort weapon in case Earth was ever threatened by an unstoppable enemy. But it would work just as well as a weapon of revenge. Lieutenant Colonel Sam Davis, one of Earth's best military strategists, spoke up. If we're really going to do this, we need to do it right. This can't be just a military operation. This needs to be a statement. We need to show these Zephyrians that humanity is nobody's pet. Admiral Collins nodded. Colonel Davis is right. I propose, we call it Operation Homecoming. We take our largest fleet, our best weapons, and our angriest soldiers. We find these Zephyrians and we make them pay for what they did to us. President Johnson returned to her seat. How long would you need to prepare for something like this? 5 years, Collins replied immediately. We'd need to build new ships, train new crews, and manufacture enough weapons to fight a war on the other side of the galaxy. But it can be done. And you're sure this is what we should do? We could try diplomacy first. Maybe they've changed in the last 500,000 years. Dr. Kim laughed bitterly. Madam President, according to the records Dr. Martinez found, the Zephyrians have been playing God with lesser species for millions of years. They didn't just abandon us. They've abandoned hundreds of other species. Some of them were destroyed when they became inconvenient. Do you really think they've developed a conscience? Captain Nina Foster, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke. I volunteer to command the fleet. I've been fighting pirates and raiders for 20 years. I'd like a chance to fight something that actually deserves it. Admiral Collins looked around the room. Every face showed the same expression. Anger. Not just anger at the Zephyrians, but anger at the realization that humanity's entire existence had been a lie. They weren't the masters of their own destiny. They were escaped pets whose owners hadn't bothered to come looking for them. All right, President Johnson said finally. Admiral Collins, you have authorization to begin Operation Homecoming, but I want regular reports, and I want options. If we find these Zephyrians and they're willing to make amends, I want to hear about it before we destroy them. Collins saluted. Understood, Madam President, but respectfully, after 500,000 years of abandonment, I don't think an apology is going to be enough. Over the next 5 years, every human shipyard worked around the clock. New ships were built, bigger and more heavily armed than anything humanity had ever created before. The flagship of the new fleet was a massive dreadnought called Terra's Vengeance. It was 3 miles long and carried enough firepower to destroy a small planet. Captain Foster personally oversaw the ship's construction. She wanted every weapon system to be perfect, every armor plate to be flawless. This ship would carry humanity's fury across the stars, and she would accept nothing less than perfection. Engineer Tony Clark worked 18-hour days, upgrading human technology with everything they had learned from the Zephyrian data cores. Human ships had always been tough and reliable, built to survive the harsh conditions of space. But now they were also equipped with weapon systems that the Zephyrians had never seen before. The most important addition was stealth technology. The Zephyrians were used to dealing with primitive species that could barely reach their own moons. They wouldn't be expecting ships that could approach undetected and strike without warning. Dr. Martinez, meanwhile, had been studying everything she could learn about Zephyrian culture and psychology. What she found disturbed her even more than their abandonment of humanity. The Zephyrians saw themselves as gardeners of the universe. They planted species on suitable worlds and then forgot about them. If a species became troublesome, they simply destroyed it and started over with a new one. They don't see us as people, she explained to Admiral Collins during one of their planning meetings. To them, we're just an interesting biological experiment that got out of control. They probably assumed we'd gone extinct by now. Then they're in for a surprise, Collins replied grimly. As the 5-year preparation period neared its end, humanity's largest fleet assembled in Earth orbit, 50 ships carrying over 200,000 soldiers and crew members. But more importantly, they carried humanity's rage and determination. Every person in that fleet had volunteered to cross the galaxy for a chance to confront the species that had abandoned them. The night before the fleet departed, Captain Foster stood on the bridge of Terra's vengeance and looked down at Earth. Somewhere down there, her own ancestors had lived and died, never knowing that they were abandoned children on a prison planet. But that was about to change. Tomorrow, humanity would begin its journey to find their creators. And when they found them, the Zephyrians would learn that their abandoned pets had grown up to become something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Captain Nina Foster walked through the corridors of Terra's Vengeance, checking on her crew. The massive ship had been traveling through hyperspace for 6 months now, and the psychological pressure was starting to show. Fights were breaking out more often. People were having nightmares about meeting their creators. Some crew members had started calling the Zephyrians the gods who threw us away. Foster understood their feelings. She felt the same anger and confusion herself. But she was the captain, and 50,000 people were depending on her to stay strong. She stopped at the ship's main observation deck, where Dr. Maya Patel was leading a group therapy session for some of the younger crew members. "It's normal to feel angry," Dr. Patel was saying. "We've learned that our entire history is a lie. Everything we thought we knew about human origins was wrong. You're allowed to be upset about that." A young engineer named Beth Turner raised her hand. "Dr. Patel, what if they don't remember us? What if we're just one of hundreds of species they've abandoned, and they don't even know who we are?" "Then, we'll remind them," Foster said, joining the group. "We'll remind them very clearly." Dr. Patel had been studying the Zephyrian cultural data for the entire journey. What she had learned painted a picture of being so arrogant and detached that they barely considered other species to be alive. The Zephyrians lived for thousands of years, maybe forever. To them, abandoning a species for 500,000 years was probably like a human forgetting about a pet goldfish for a week. "Captain, I need to show you something," Dr. Patel said after the therapy session ended. They walked to her research lab, where she had been analyzing Zephyrian psychology profiles. "Look at this," she said, activating a holographic display. According to their own records, the Zephyrians have never encountered a species that developed advanced technology after being relocated. In their experience, primitive species either die out or remain primitive forever. Foster studied the data. "So they have no experience dealing with advanced species that used to be their prisoners?" "Exactly. And more importantly, they have no experience with war. The last time the Zephyrians fought anyone was over 2 million years ago, and that was against another advanced species that they eventually destroyed completely. Since then, they've only dealt with primitive civilizations that couldn't fight back." Foster smiled grimly. "So they're out of practice. Worse than that, their entire military doctrine is based on controlling primitive species. Their weapons are designed to disable and capture, not to destroy. They're used to dealing with Stone Age civilizations that are impressed by flying ships and energy weapons. Meanwhile, Chief Engineer Carlos Rivera was dealing with a different set of problems. The human fleet was pushing deeper into unknown space, following star charts that were 500,000 years old. Some of the systems they passed through had changed dramatically since the Zephyrians had last updated their maps. "Captain, we've lost another escort ship," Rivera reported during the daily briefing. "The frigate Houston ran into a dark matter field that wasn't on our charts. The entire ship just vanished." Foster studied the navigation reports. They had started with 50 ships, but the journey was taking its toll. Strange gravitational anomalies, cosmic storms, and uncharted obstacles had claimed 8 vessels so far, but the remaining ships were still strong enough to complete their mission. "How much longer until we reach Zephyrian space?" Foster asked. "According to our calculations, about 12 more months," Rivera replied. "But Captain, we're starting to pick up artificial signals. I think we're getting close to their outer territories." Communication specialist Beth Turner had been monitoring. those signals for weeks. Most of them were automated messages, broadcasting in the ancient Zephyrian language that Dr. Martinez had taught her to understand. The messages were simple. Welcome, returning caretakers. Please report to processing stations for debriefing and reassignment. They think we're Zephyrians coming home, Turner explained. Their automated systems are designed to guide their own ships through their territory. They're not expecting anyone else. Foster saw the opportunity immediately. Can we use their own guidance systems to get deeper into their space without being detected? I think so. Their identification systems are looking for Zephyrian energy signatures, and we've been able to fake those using the data Dr. Martinez found. As far as their computers know, we're a returning exploration fleet. Dr. Patel joined the conversation. Captain, this confirms what I've been learning about their psychology. The Zephyrians are so arrogant that they can't imagine any of their former subjects developing spaceflight. It would literally never occur to them that we might come looking for them. The fleet continued its journey through Zephyrian space, following automated guidance signals toward what appeared to be a major processing center. Along the way, they passed dozens of worlds that showed signs of Zephyrian activity. Some planets had huge orbital stations where the aliens studied primitive civilizations. Others had been stripped of resources and abandoned. My God, Foster whispered as they passed one system where an entire planet had been cracked open like an egg. They're not just gardeners, they're strip miners. The evidence of Zephyrian activities became more disturbing as they traveled deeper into alien territory. They found worlds where entire species had been relocated, just like humanity had been. But many of these relocations had gone wrong. Planets covered in bones, dead worlds where the atmosphere had been accidentally poisoned, failed experiments that the Zephyrians had simply abandoned when they became inconvenient. Captain, you need to see this, Dr. Patel called from her lab. She had been analyzing data from a Zephyrian research station they had passed. I found records of other species that tried to resist relocation. Look what happened to them. The holographic display showed the destruction of an entire solar system. The species living there had developed early spaceflight and had tried to fight back when the Zephyrians came to relocate them. The Zephyrian response had been swift and total. They had used some kind of weapon to cause the system's star to explode, destroying everything within 20 light years. They don't negotiate, Foster said quietly. They don't try to find peaceful solutions. If a species becomes inconvenient, they just erase it. That's right. And Captain, according to these records, humanity qualifies as inconvenient. We were supposed to remain primitive forever. The fact that we've developed spaceflight makes us a threat to their entire system. Foster called a meeting of her senior officers. Admiral Collins appeared on the main screen via hyperspace communication, along with President Johnson and the other leaders back on Earth. Madam President, we're about 2 months away from the Zephyrian home system, Foster reported. But I need to tell you what we've found out here. They're not just the aliens who abandoned us. They're monsters who have been destroying civilizations for millions of years. She shared the data they had collected during their journey. The images of dead worlds and failed experiments filled the conference room. President Johnson's face grew pale as she saw the evidence of Zephyrian cruelty. Captain, are you telling me that if we hadn't developed spaceflight, they might have eventually come back and destroyed us anyway? Yes, Madam President. According to their own records, they consider Earth to be a failed experiment. Our development of technology means we're no longer useful to them. In their minds, that makes us expendable. Admiral Collins leaned forward. Captain Foster, I want you to know that your mission parameters have just changed. This is no longer just about revenge for abandonment. This is about survival. If we don't stop them, they'll eventually come to finish what they started. Foster nodded. Understood, Admiral. We'll make sure they never get that chance. As Terra's Vengeance and its escort fleet approached the Zephyrian home system, Foster stood on her bridge and looked out at the stars ahead. Somewhere in that direction was the species that had created humanity's greatest lie and then abandoned them to live it. But they had made one critical mistake. They had assumed that their abandoned pets would never grow up to be predators. In 2 months, they would learn just how wrong they had been. Commander Greg Wilson checked his weapon one more time as the human boarding craft approached the Zephyrian monitoring station. This would be humanity's first face-to-face meeting with their creators in 500,000 years. Wilson's team of 20 Marines was ready for anything, but none of them really knew what to expect. The Zephyrian station was beautiful in an alien way. It looked like it had been grown rather than built, with smooth curves and surfaces that glowed with soft light. There were no visible weapons or defensive systems. Why would there be? For millions of years, the only visitors to Zephyrian space had been their own people. "Remember, we're not here to negotiate," Wilson told his team over the radio. "We're here to deliver a message. These things abandoned us like unwanted pets. It's time they learned what happens when pets grow teeth." Dr. Rachel Stone, the team's translator, was nervous but determined. She had spent 2 years learning the Zephyrian language from the ancient records, but this would be her first chance to actually speak with a living Zephyrian. She just hoped she could keep her anger under control long enough to deliver humanity's ultimatum. Their boarding craft docked with the station without any resistance. The airlock opened automatically as if the Zephyrians were expecting visitors. Wilson led his team inside, weapons ready but not yet aimed at anything. The interior of the station was even stranger than the outside. The walls seemed to be made of living crystal that pulsed with different colors. There was no artificial gravity, but somehow Wilson's team could walk normally on what appeared to be the floor. The air was breathable, though it had a strange sweet smell. "Motion sensors are picking up life forms ahead," reported Sergeant Danny Reed, Wilson's second-in-command. 3 of them moving this way. The first living Zephyrian that Wilson saw made him stop and stare. It was tall, maybe 8 feet, and so thin it looked like it might blow away in a strong wind. Its skin was translucent, showing veins of light instead of blood. It had 4 arms and a head that was too large for its body. But what struck Wilson most was its expression. It looked curious, not afraid. The Zephyrian spoke in a voice like wind chimes. Dr. Stone listened carefully, then translated for the team. "It's asking why we're carrying weapons," she said. "It wants to know if we're part of some kind of training exercise." Wilson stepped forward and removed his helmet so the alien could see his face. "Tell it that we're humans from Earth. Tell it we want to speak with whoever's in charge of this station," Stone translated, and the Zephyrian's expression changed. It tilted its oversized head and made a sound that might have been laughter. When it spoke again, Stone's face grew red with anger. "What did it say?" Wilson asked. It said, "Oh, the little evolved ones have learned to play with fire. How amusing. You should go back to your garden world before you hurt yourselves." Wilson felt his own anger rising. This creature was talking to them like they were children who had wandered away from home. Ask it if it remembers what its people did to humanity 500,000 years ago. The Zephyrian listened to Stone's translation, then responded with what was clearly dismissal. It waved one of its 4 hands and started to turn away. "It says that Zephyrians don't waste time discussing ancient caretaking duties with specimens," Stone translated. "It's telling us to return to our ship and go home." That was when Wilson lost his temper. He drew his sidearm and pointed it at the Zephyrian. The alien stopped and looked at the weapon with what appeared to be mild interest, not fear. "Tell it that humanity didn't come here to be dismissed," Wilson said through gritted teeth. "Tell it that we came here for answers, and if we don't get them, things are going to get very unpleasant." The Zephyrian spoke again, and this time its tone was more condescending than before. Stone's translation made Wilson's blood boil. "It says that we're displaying exactly the kind of aggressive behavior that proves we're still primitive. It says that if we don't leave immediately, it will contact the local authorities to have us removed." Wilson looked around at his Marines. Every one of them had the same expression of barely controlled rage. They had traveled across the galaxy to confront their creators, only to be treated like misbehaving pets who needed to be sent to their room. "Sergeant Reed, contact Captain Foster. Tell her we need to speak with the station commander immediately." The Zephyrian apparently understood some human language because it made that wind chime sound again. When it spoke, Dr. Stone's face went pale. "Wilson, it just said that there's no point in speaking to anyone in authority because humans aren't important enough to deserve their attention. It said we should be grateful that our species was preserved at all, instead of being allowed to die with our original world. That was the final straw. Wilson had spent 18 months traveling across space, dreaming of this moment. He had imagined many different scenarios for humanity's first contact with their creators, but he had never imagined being patted on the head and told to run along. Dr. Stone, I want you to deliver a message to this thing, and I want you to translate it exactly as I say it. Stone nodded, though she looked nervous about what was coming. Tell it this, Wilson said, his voice cold and steady. Humanity remembers being abandoned. We remember being treated like animals in a zoo. We remember being dumped on a planet and forgotten like unwanted pets. But what this creature needs to understand is that pets sometimes grow up to bite their owners, and we've grown very large teeth. The Zephyrian listened to the translation with what appeared to be amusement. When it responded, its tone was even more condescending than before. It says that humanity is displaying typical primitive behavior, Stone translated. It says that advanced species don't threaten their caretakers. It's offering to contact the appropriate authorities to arrange for our return to Earth, where we can continue our development under proper supervision. Wilson holstered his sidearm and activated his communicator. Captain Foster, this is Commander Wilson. The Zephyrians aren't interested in talking. They still think we're their pets. I recommend we move to the next phase of the operation. Foster's voice came back immediately. Understood, Commander. All teams evacuate the station immediately. We're moving to demonstration mode. Wilson looked at the Zephyrian one more time. Dr. Stone, tell it that humanity tried diplomacy first. Tell it that what happens next is because they chose not to listen. As the human team evacuated the station, the Zephyrian continued to watch them with what appeared to be mild curiosity. Even as Wilson's boarding craft disconnected from the station, the alien showed no sign of alarm or concern. From the bridge of Terra's vengeance, Captain Foster watched the station through her tactical display. Around her, the rest of the human fleet had moved into attack formation. 42 ships armed with the most advanced weapons humanity had ever created. All ships, this is Captain Foster, she announced over the fleet communication system. The Zephyrians have had their chance to acknowledge what they did to humanity. They chose not to take it. All vessels, you are authorized to engage. The Zephyrian station was destroyed in less than 30 seconds. Quantum torpedoes tore through its crystalline structure like bullets through paper. The aliens inside never had time to send a distress signal or even understand what was happening to them. As the debris from the station scattered into space, Foster felt a grim satisfaction. The first blow had been struck. After 500,000 years, humanity had finally fought back against their creators. But more importantly, they had sent a message that would reach every Zephyrian in the galaxy. The abandoned pets had grown up. They had learned to make weapons, and they were no longer interested in being anyone's specimens. The Zephyrians were about to learn that some species, when abandoned and forgotten, don't just survive. They evolve into something their creators never expected. They evolve into predators. Admiral Ryan Collins stood in the command center of his flagship Retribution, watching the tactical displays that showed the greatest military operation in human history. 3 months had passed since Captain Foster had destroyed the first Zephyrian station, and the war that followed had spread across dozens of star systems. The Zephyrians had responded to humanity's attack with confusion rather than anger. Their first military response had been to send ships equipped with capture nets and stun weapons, the kind of tools they used to control primitive civilizations. They seemed genuinely surprised when human weapons destroyed their vessels completely. Admiral, we're receiving reports from Captain Danny Reed's squadron, reported his communications officer. They've successfully liberated another Zephyrian research facility. 17 different species were being held there for experimentation. Collins nodded grimly. Each facility they captured revealed more evidence of Zephyrian cruelty. The aliens didn't just relocate species. They kidnapped individuals for study, kept entire civilizations in prison-like reservations, and disposed of any group that became inconvenient. What's the status on Operation Shepherd? Collins asked. Captain Reed reports that all the liberated species have been given the choice to return to their homeworlds or join our fleet. Most are choosing to fight alongside us. That had been one of humanity's greatest advantages. The galaxy was full of species that had been mistreated by the Zephyrians. When human forces offered them weapons and a chance for revenge, most jumped at the opportunity. The human fleet had grown from 50 ships to over 300 as more and more alien allies joined their cause. Dr. Lisa Martinez, now serving as Collins's strategic advisor, approached with a new intelligence report. Admiral, we've identified the location of a major Zephyrian administrative center. It's in the Proxima Vel system, about 6 light-years from here. Collins studied the tactical information. The center was heavily defended by Zephyrian standards, but their idea of heavy defense was designed to prevent primitive species from escaping, not to repel a military attack. What kind of facilities are we looking at? According to our intelligence, it's where they coordinate relocations for this entire sector of the galaxy. If we can capture it intact, we'll have access to information about every species they've ever moved or destroyed. Collins made his decision quickly. Get me Captain Reed, I'm giving him command of the assault. Captain Danny Reed had become one of humanity's best tactical commanders during the war. His specialty was hit-and-run attacks that struck hard and vanished before the Zephyrians could respond. His squadron of 12 destroyers had earned a reputation for appearing anywhere in Zephyrian space without warning. Admiral, my ships are ready to move on the Proxima Vel target, Reed reported over the communication system. But I need to warn you about something. The Zephyrians are starting to adapt to our tactics. What do you mean? Their recent ships have been equipped with different weapons. Instead of capture nets and stun beams, they're starting to use actual destructive weapons. Nothing as advanced as our systems, but they're learning. Collins wasn't surprised. The Zephyrians had survived for millions of years by being adaptable. It made sense that they would eventually realize that humanity required different tactics than Stone Age civilizations. Just remember, Captain, they're still fighting the last war. They're used to dealing with primitive species that are impressed by energy weapons and flying ships. They have no experience fighting anyone with technology that matches their own. Reed's attack on the Proxima Vel Administrative Center was a perfect example of the difference between human and Zephyrian military thinking. The Zephyrians had positioned their defensive ships in a formation designed to prevent escaping prisoners from reaching hyperspace. They never considered that attackers might approach from multiple directions at once. Reed's destroyers hit the facility from 6 different angles, using quantum torpedoes to punch through the station's defenses before the Zephyrians even realized they were under attack. Within 30 minutes, the entire facility was under human control. The intelligence they captured was even more valuable than Collins had hoped. The administrative computers contained detailed records of Zephyrian activities across the entire galaxy. Thousands of species had been relocated, studied, or destroyed over the past million years. But more importantly, the computers contained the location of the Zephyrian home system. Admiral, you need to see this, Dr. Martinez said, her voice filled with excitement and anger. The Zephyrians have been planning to return to Earth. Collins studied the captured files. According to Zephyrian records, humanity's development of spaceflight had been noted and classified as a deviation requiring correction. A Zephyrian fleet was already being prepared to return to Earth and either relocate humanity again or destroy them entirely. How long do we have? Collins asked. According to this schedule, the Zephyrian correction fleet was supposed to leave for Earth in 6 months. Collins felt a cold anger settle in his stomach. Even now, after humanity had proven they could fight back, the Zephyrians still saw them as a problem to be solved rather than people to be respected. Dr. Martinez, I want you to send a message to President Johnson. Tell her that the Zephyrians are planning to attack Earth, and tell her that we're not going to give them the chance. The war's turning point came when engineer Tony Clark successfully deployed humanity's most devastating weapon. The Prometheus engine had been designed as a last resort, a way to destroy an entire star system if Earth was ever threatened by an unstoppable enemy. But Collins decided it was time to show the Zephyrians what unstoppable really looked like. The target was a Zephyrian research system, where they kept their most important scientific facilities. According to captured intelligence, this was where they developed the technologies used to relocate and control other species. Clark's team approached the system in a single heavily shielded ship, avoiding detection by mimicking the energy signature of a Zephyrian supply vessel. The Prometheus engine itself was small enough to fit in a cargo container, but its effects would be visible across the galaxy. Prometheus engine deployed, Clark reported to Admiral Collins. Initiating stellar acceleration sequence. The weapon worked by introducing artificial elements into a star's core, forcing the nuclear fusion process to speed up dramatically. Instead of burning steadily for billions of years, the star would exhaust its fuel in a matter of hours and expand into a red giant. The Zephyrian research facilities orbited close to their star, taking advantage of its energy for their experiments. They had no warning before their sun began to swell and brighten. Within 6 hours, the entire inner system was uninhabitable. The Zephyrians were forced to abandon millions of years of scientific research and flee to safer systems. The psychological impact was even more important than the physical destruction. For the first time in their history, the Zephyrians faced an enemy that could destroy entire star systems. They were no longer the most powerful force in the galaxy. "Admiral, we're receiving a communication from the Zephyrian High Council," reported Collins's communication officer. "They're requesting a meeting to discuss terms." Collins almost laughed. After months of treating humanity like misbehaving pets, the Zephyrians finally wanted to talk. But it was too late for diplomacy. "Tell them that humanity tried talking," Collins replied. "We tried explaining how we felt about being abandoned. They weren't interested. Now the only terms we're interested in discussing are their surrender." The Zephyrian response came 12 hours later. Instead of surrender, they announced the mobilization of their entire military force. Every Zephyrian ship in the galaxy was being called back to defend their home system. Collins smiled as he read the intelligence reports. The Zephyrians were finally taking humanity seriously, but they were making a critical mistake. They were fighting a defensive war, trying to protect their home territory. Humanity was fighting for revenge, and they were willing to take any risk to get it. "All ships, this is Admiral Collins," he announced to the human fleet. "The Zephyrians want to make their final stand at their home system. That's fine with us. We're going to give them the biggest fight they've ever seen." As the human fleet prepared for the final assault, Collins looked out at the stars and thought about the long journey that had brought them to this point. Humanity had started as abandoned pets on a prison planet, but they had grown into something their creators never expected. They had become the monsters that even monsters feared, and tomorrow they would prove it. The Zephyrian home system was unlike anything Captain Nina Foster had ever seen. 3 planets orbited a binary star system, and all of them glowed with artificial light. Massive orbital structures connected the worlds like bridges made of crystal and energy. This was the heart of a civilization that had ruled the galaxy for millions of years. "My God," whispered Dr. Maya Patel as she studied the sensor readings from Terra's Vengeance. "The entire system is one giant city. There must be trillions of Zephyrians living here." Foster stood on her bridge, surrounded by holographic displays, showing the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. Over 800 ships now flew under human command, including vessels from dozens of species that the Zephyrians had oppressed. This would be the final battle, and everyone knew it. "Admiral Collins, we're in position," Foster reported to the fleet commander. "All ships ready for the final assault." Collins' voice came back over the communication system, calm and determined. "Captain Foster, this is it. 500,000 years ago, our creators abandoned us because they thought we were worthless. Today we proved that they were wrong about us. But more importantly, today we proved that we're better than them." The Zephyrian defense fleet was impressive by the standards of any normal species. Over 2,000 ships arranged in perfect geometric formations around their home worlds. Their vessels were beautiful, looking more like works of art than weapons of war. But Foster knew that beauty could be deceiving. "All ships, commence attack," Collins ordered. What followed was the largest space battle in galactic history. Human ships built for war and armed with weapons designed to destroy rather than capture, smashed into the Zephyrian formations like hammers hitting glass. The aliens had never fought an enemy that matched their technology, and their tactical thinking was centuries out of date. Colonel Sam Davis, led the ground assault on the primary Zephyrian world, a planet called Ether Prime. His dropships cut through the planet's atmosphere while the space battle raged overhead. The surface below was covered in crystalline cities that stretched as far as the eye could see. "Remember, we're not here to destroy everything," Davis told his troops over the radio. "We're here to make sure the Zephyrians understand what they did to us. But we're not going to become them." The Zephyrian ground forces were even less prepared for war than their space fleet. For millions of years, they had only dealt with primitive species that could be controlled with simple energy weapons. They had never faced soldiers equipped with powered armor, quantum rifles, and tactical nuclear weapons. Davis's forces cut through the alien defenses like a knife through paper. Within 6 hours, they had secured landing zones around the planetary capital and were advancing toward the Zephyrian High Council chambers. Meanwhile, in space, Captain Foster was leading the final push against the Zephyrian command ships. The alien vessels were retreating toward their home worlds, but human ships were faster and better armed. One by one, the Zephyrian defenders were being destroyed or forced to surrender. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian High Council," reported Foster's communication officer. "They're asking to speak with our commanding officer." "Put them through," Foster replied. She was curious to hear what their creators had to say now that they were losing the war. The holographic display activated, showing a Zephyrian unlike any they had seen before. This one was ancient, even by the standards of a species that lived for thousands of years. Its crystalline skin was dim with age and its forearms moved slowly and carefully. "I am Prime Velnoth, speaker for the High Council of Zephyr," the alien said in accented but understandable English. "I wish to speak with the leader of the human forces." Admiral Collins appeared on Foster's screen, connecting from his own flagship. "I'm Admiral Ryan Collins, commander of the human fleet. Are you ready to surrender?" Prime Velnoth made a sound that might have been laughter. "Surrender? Young humans, you misunderstand the situation. We created your species. We gave you life, intelligence, and a beautiful world to inhabit. You should be thanking us, not attacking us." Foster felt her anger rise. Even now, with their civilization burning around them, the Zephyrians still saw humanity as ungrateful pets. "You didn't create us," Collins replied coldly. "You kidnapped us. You experimented on us. You treated us like animals in a zoo. And when your own world had problems, you dumped us on a planet and flew away without a second thought. We saved your species from extinction," Prime Velnoth protested. "Your original world was dying. We gave you a chance to survive and develop. You gave us a prison," Collins said. "And then you forgot about us for 500,000 years. Did you ever once wonder how we were doing? Did you ever check to see if we had survived?" The ancient Zephyrian was silent for a long moment. When it finally spoke, its voice was quieter. "Your development was not scheduled for review for another 100,000 years. Primitive species develop slowly." Foster laughed bitterly. "Primitive? We crossed the galaxy to find you. We built weapons that can destroy stars. We've liberated dozens of species from your control. How primitive do we look now?" On the planet's surface, Dr. Maya Patel had reached the High Council chambers with Colonel Davis's forces. The building was a work of art, with walls made of living crystal that sang in harmonious tones. But the beauty was tainted by the knowledge of what had been decided in these chambers over the millennia. "Dr. Patel, we found something you need to see," Davis called from deeper in the building. He had discovered a vast chamber filled with holographic displays, each one showing a different world. Patel studied the displays with growing horror. Each screen showed a species that the Zephyrians were currently managing. Primitive civilizations being studied, relocated, or prepared for disposal. Dozens of worlds where entire species lived and died without ever knowing that their fate was being decided by aliens who saw them as insects. "Colonel, look at this one," Patel said, pointing to a display that showed a world covered in oceans. The inhabitants were aquatic creatures that had just discovered fire. According to the Zephyrian notes, they were scheduled for relocation because their world contained valuable minerals. "How many species have they destroyed?" Davis asked quietly. Patel continued studying the displays. The numbers were staggering. Over the past million years, the Zephyrians had relocated thousands of species. Most had died during the relocation process or failed to adapt to their new worlds. Only a few, like humanity, had survived long enough to develop advanced technology. "Colonel, we need to document all of this," Patel said. "The galaxy needs to know what the Zephyrians have been doing." Back in space, the battle was nearing its end. The Zephyrian fleet had been reduced to less than 300 ships, and most of those were trying to flee the system. "Prime Velnoth's," voice came over the communication system one final time. "Humans, we offer you a bargain," the ancient alien said. "We will recognize your species as equals. We will share our technology with you. We will give you your own sector of the galaxy to rule. All we ask is that you allow us to continue our work with the other primitive species." Admiral Collins didn't even hesitate. "No deal. You've had millions of years to prove that you could be trusted with that kind of power. You failed. You're not gardeners of the galaxy. You're parasites." Foster watched as the final Zephyrian ships were destroyed or forced to surrender. The species that had abandoned humanity 500,000 years ago was finally paying for their arrogance. "Prime Velnoth, this is Captain Nina Foster," she said over the communication system. "You wanted to know how your abandoned pets turned out. We turned out to be everything you never expected us to be. We became strong enough to cross the galaxy. We became smart enough to build weapons you can't defend against. And we became angry enough to make sure you never abandon another species again." The ancient Zephyrian's image flickered and died as his ship was destroyed by quantum torpedoes. With his death, the last organized resistance in the system ended. Colonel Davis contacted the fleet from the planet's surface. "Admiral, we've secured the High Council chambers. Dr. Patel has found records of their activities across the entire galaxy. Thousands of species, Admiral. They've been playing God with thousands of civilizations." Foster looked out at the burning remains of the Zephyrian fleet and felt a complex mix of satisfaction and sadness. Humanity had finally gotten their revenge. They had proven that they were nobody's pets. But in doing so, they had also become the most powerful military force in the galaxy. "Admiral Collins, what happens now?" Foster asked. "We've won the war, but what do we do with the victory?" Collins was quiet for a long moment before answering. "Now we prove that we're better than they were, Captain. We've liberated this galaxy from the Zephyrians. Now we have to make sure we don't become them.